Hi guys, it's Bridget back with another video. Today I wanted to recommend to you guys some books under 200 pages that you can read in a day or two but still get that great sense of immersion that you feel when you're reading just a really wonderful book. These are books that I have read and that I've really loved. I know that a lot of us don't have endless time to dedicate to really long books as much as I love them. This list kind of has a mix of genres and subjects, so I think that there'll really be something for everyone. The first book that I want to talk about is 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene Hanff. This book is a compilation of letters that were sent between Helen, who was a freelance writer in New York City at the time, and a used book dealer in London. They all take place between like the 1940s and 1960s. The letters start off just as like purchase orders for books that Helen is interested in, and over the years they become more and more personal. What I really loved about it was that even though the letters are all really short, they're all very sweet, and they show this development of a beautiful friendship over the years, purely founded on a love of books and reading, and it was just really beautiful to me. After reading it, I just felt this attachment to these people, and it just was all the more sweet to me because I knew that these letters were really sent and that it was a real friendship that developed. This is a really short book. I think it clocks in at 97 pages, so you can finish this in an hour or two, and I just really think it will make you happy when you finish it. It's a great book for people who like books in the form of letters, and also people who love books about books. Highly recommend it if you have not already read it. Alright, so the next book on my list is The Test by Sylvain Neuvel. I think that I'm saying his last name right, but correct me if I'm wrong. This book is really short, but it packs a big punch. I could not put it down, and I thought about it for days after I finished reading it. You have Adir Jalil, who is an immigrant living in London, and he is about to take his British citizenship test. Right off the bat, like, you can tell Adir is just this really sweet, kind-hearted, really eager and goofy guy, like the kind of guy who would make dad jokes to the receptionist in a building. And he has studied, he has prepared, and he is ready to ace this citizenship test and become a British citizen. Unfortunately, during the test, the group is taken hostage by terrorists, and Adir has to navigate this really high stakes situation. There are so many twists and turns packed into this short book that I can't really talk too much about it without giving too much away. But if you like really exciting kind of edge of your seat books, this one is a great one. It's 104 pages, so you can finish it really quickly, and trust me, it will leave an impact. The next book on my list is The Sense of an Ending by Julian. This book follows Toni Webster, who's just your kind of like everyday, average, middle-aged man, and the book follows him as he revisits his memories of his youth and of his young adulthood after a figure comes back into his life and has a lot of hostility towards him, and he doesn't really understand why this person has this anger. This book is a really great example of an unreliable narrator, and the way that we remember situations can be really different from the way that they actually occurred, and how we alter them and alter our memories in order to fit our own personal narrative. It's really beautifully written. The author does a great job of balancing really lovely and descriptive writing without being too overly flowery, which I don't know about you, but it's something that I really do not like in books. After I finished reading it, I really wanted to go back and reread it and see if I could pick up clues and hints that would foreshadow the ending that we have. It's really great. I highly recommend it, especially if you like more contemporary or literary fiction. The next book on this list is one of my favorites. It's All Systems Red by Martha Wells, and this is the first book in the Murderbot Diaries. I honestly didn't expect very much from this when I picked it up. I think I solely chose it because it was available on my library's ebook system and it was short, and those were my two criteria. But right away, within the first couple pages, I was completely sold. The story follows a sec unit, which is basically like this security android that's got augmented robotic parts, but then also has some organic parts, so it's a combination. I guess that's like a cyborg. And these units are hired out by the company to protect crews on their like interplanetary missions. This particular sec unit calls itself Murderbot, completely on its own. That's just what it's named itself. And it's hacked its governor module, so now it's completely autonomous. But this is something that it really has to hide because these security units are seen as extremely dangerous and volatile if they are not controlled by the company. Murderbot essentially has to begrudgingly keep acting as a security consultant in order to protect its cover and hide the fact that it's actually gone rogue. Inevitably, something happens and Murderbot has to reveal to its current crew that it is independent and it has hacked its governor module. And you eventually start following them as they try to figure out who they want to be with this independence. And what I love about this book and this series is that Murderbot is so relatable. They have the most entertaining narrative voice. Their inner dialogue is so sarcastic and moody, and they don't really understand social cues, which leads to a lot of just really funny, awkward misunderstandings or miscommunications or just interactions in general. And really all that they want is to be left alone by the humans and other robots so that it can just go watch its favorite TV shows for the 100th time. And honestly, who cannot relate to that? I just absolutely loved how obsessed they were with this one particular soap opera. Throughout their journey of self-discovery, you can't help but really fall in love with Murderbot, and it's just really such a fun story. I highly recommend it, especially if you're into the sci-fi genre. This one's a winner. I am so excited to keep reading this storyline. The next book on this list is Sula by Toni Morrison. This is an older book, but I think it's still incredibly relevant and very poignant. The novel tracks the lives of two Black women, Nell Wright and Sula Peace, as they grow up as friends in this small town in Ohio in, I believe it's the 1920s to the 1940s. They live in the Bottom, which is this really poor Black neighborhood up on a hill above the town. The two girls end up taking very different paths in life. Nell becomes a mom and she stays in the town to raise her family. Sula ends up leaving the town in order to move to the big city. She actually ends up getting this really negative reputation. Eventually, both of the women come together again and they have to face the consequences of their choices in life. What really sets this book apart for me are just the wonderful, unflinching descriptions of life in the Bottom and in this poor neighborhood. Toni Morrison just really does this fantastic job of showing the resilience of a community who has just had to really harden itself against a constant stream of racism and injustice. She's able to write these hard to read, ugly scenes in a way that's just really frank and unapologetic, but at the same time it's just so beautifully written. You can't read this book without feeling some sort of emotion, whether that's anger or sadness. I highly recommend it. The next book on this list is To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. This book had such a profound impact on me when I read it. It's the story of a group of astronauts and scientists who are traveling to 4 habitable planets in order to gather data and do research and send this information back to Earth. At the time of their launch, space travel is really highly respected, it's really encouraged, but as they kind of jump through the years on these long journeys to these planets, the cultures on Earth, the values on Earth, especially surrounding their particular mission, begin to change, and the crew must come to terms with this fact. The book reads like a field report or a letter, and it feels like the narrator is speaking directly to you, which I think just makes the book feel so much more personal. For me, what I really loved about this book is that there were not any high stakes situations or high action adventure. The core of the story is this sense of curiosity and this just joy of discovery, while at the same time, how do you research and make contact with these untainted worlds without disrupting the ecosystems after the humans have left? It really made me emotional when I finished reading this. I have to keep reminding myself that it didn't actually happen and that this wasn't a real account of space travel. It just feels really real to me. Even if you are not drawn to sci-fi usually, I highly recommend it. It's so much more than that, and it just really offers this wonderful look into humanity's sense of curiosity. The next book on the list is Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. This is a story about what happens after children return from their grand fairy tale adventures. You hear these stories all the time, that someone falls down a rabbit hole or they go through a wardrobe to another world, but what happens when they return and nobody believes their story and they have to pretend that these experiences didn't really happen. This particular book arrives with our protagonist Nancy arriving at Eleanor West School for Wayward Children, where she really quickly learns that everyone at this school, the children, the teachers, even the headmistress, Eleanor West, have all been to these other worlds just like she has, and they are all struggling to cope with the loss of these adventures and these worlds. The characters in this story are also diverse and interesting, and their stories are really complicated and oftentimes very tragic. What I love about this book in particular is that the author does a really fantastic job of intertwining lighthearted, humorous moments with some really dark themes and a thriller mystery at the core of the story. It's one part horror and one part like whimsical fun, so I highly recommend it. I have read the next 2 books in this series and they're all extremely creative and great reads. The last book on this list is Enter the Aardvark by Jessica Anthony, and this is a book that I really debated putting on this list because I think it's going to take a really specific kind of reader to enjoy it the way that I did. It's a political satire and it follows 2 men. The first is a modern day Republican congressman who is living in Washington, D.C. and is in deep denial about his sexuality. One day, there is a taxidermied aardvark that shows up on his front doorstep, and he spends the rest of the book trying to get rid of it and manage this huge political scandal that it is somehow causing. The second man that you follow is actually the taxidermist who created the aardvark in the 1800s, and he is struggling with the loss of a very special friend of his. This book is honestly completely absurd, and the characters are not really that likable, but it was somehow so compelling that I kept wanting to keep reading, and I was so sucked into the drama of these 2 characters' lives. I just wanted to see how the author was possibly going to wrap everything up and tie up the parallels between these 2 men. I have never read anything like this, so if you are looking for something a little bit different, this would be a great option. It's got sort of an off-brand humor, and if you can handle kind of unsympathetic characters, I would highly recommend it. If you do end up reading it, please let me know in the comments what you think of it. I'm so curious what other people's thoughts are on this. Alright, so there were 8 books, all of them were under 200 pages, that you could easily read in a day, add them to your reading list, and get that reading in that maybe you just do not have the time for. Again, if you enjoyed this video and you want to hear more content like it, please like and subscribe. Otherwise, I will see you guys all in the next video. Bye!